like over.
Yeah.
I looked at a house.
Okay, we're going to call the Town Plan and Zoning Commission meeting of April 10th to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have the secretary read the roll, please.
Commissioner Ito?
Here.
Commissioner Camillo?
Here.
Commissioner Claffey?
Here.
Commissioner Fox? Commissioner Payne? Commissioner Sobieski?
Here.
Commissioner Woods?
Here.
Commissioner Vitalica? Commissioner Braverman?
Here.
Commissioner Giangrave?
We'll have Commissioner Braverman sit in for Commissioner Payne. Mr. Planner, approval of the agenda. Do we have some changes to make?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would request that you move the town planner report up to after the public participation so that the consultant who should be here, who is here, can make his presentation and get the commission's input on that. And then I have 4 items to be deleted. Under new business, petition 15-19, that's Artichoke Facilities request for outdoor dining. It needs a public hearing. It should have been on the agenda for a public hearing rather than new business. So we need to put it on the agenda for public hearing and hopefully action at your next meeting. And then the site plan modification, which was associated with that, will also then have to do at the next meeting. And under old business, the Vaishnav Parvar Hindu Temple, their application for a special permit, they've asked that action be tabled on it for the moment. They're discussing on their board whether the conditions of approval that I have recommended are acceptable to the board. If they're not acceptable to their board, I imagine they'll then withdraw their application. And then also under old business, the update on petition 0118, that's the O'Reilly Auto Parts. The consulting engineer was going to come tonight, but he asked me just to communicate on his behalf that the MDC has worked out an arrangement so that they will have access to the sewer pipe that has been covered over by the neighboring property owner. And so they will be able, O'Reilly will be able to connect their sanitary system to the sanitary pipeline as was required by TPZ. And so they don't need to make a presentation tonight. So again, I recommend deleting 4 items, new business A and B, and old business A and B.
Okay, and I have a change to the agenda also. I would like to move petition B under public hearings to the first position. I see that the chief of police and the fire marshal are here, and I don't want to have them sitting through a whole bunch of other stuff. I want to get them in so they could they have other important things to do than sit here and listen to us. So we're going to move that to B to A and A to B. Any questions on the changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we'll make those changes. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Anyone from the public wishing to speak at this time, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we'll go into the consultant who's here for the, if he come forward, state his name and address for the record, and give us an overview of his services.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Members of the commission? My name is Glenn Chalder. Had the chance to work with the town and with the commission on the 2010 plan.
Excuse me, that mic doesn't sound like it's on.
Do I have to have a,
There we go,
well,
that's better. Yep.
there you go. Had a chance to work with the commission and the town on the 2010 Plan of Conservation and Development, and I'm excited to have a chance to work with you on the next update of that. In the last 10 years, the state statutes have changed and essentially required that the commission do an update within a 10-year window. With the foresight of the commission to get started on the process now, we will do that. Our target OPM date is June of 2020, so that gives us about 14 months. The next major step for us is to actually get an agreement cooking with the town, and before we did that, I just wanted to review the scope and schedule with the commission. If you have any thoughts or changes about the process, now's the right time to modify this to incorporate that. So if we have a couple of minutes, does everybody Yep, it looks like everybody's got it in front of them. Suggest that we break the process down into 3 major steps. The first step is a scoping and researching phase of the process where we would talk about and do research and investigation on issues which are important to the community and to the commission. We've offered a choice in the scope of work here for the commission, one of which is a public workshop meeting where we would try to get as many Newington residents as we could to a common venue and engage them in talking about issues which are important to the plan. And the other option could be an online survey where we would try to get as many Newington residents as possible to engage in a survey, which we could then use to help inform the process. So one of the issues I'd like to go through with you tonight is which of those 2 you would prefer. The second major phase of the process is what we call organizing and strategizing. The POCD naturally breaks this down into 3 key components or themes. These are conservation issues, things in Newington we would want to protect or preserve. It includes things like natural resources, open space, community character, etc. The next major theme of the plan might be development issues, how the community is going to grow or change in the future. This includes Newington Center, transit-oriented development opportunities, housing, residential development, housing needs, and business and economic development, and then also infrastructure, which includes things like community facilities, roadways, bicycle, pedestrian, water and sewer utilities, etc. And we've set up the process here to include what we call listening sessions, where we might have a topical meeting on the POCD, and we would invite relevant boards and commissions to come and give us some additional input for the POCD. The third major phase of the process would be preparing and adopting the plan. And this is, again, based on the input that we've received, the discussions we've had, working sessions, actually prepare a draft plan document and move towards adoption. On the very last page, bless you.
Thank you.
On the very last page is our proposed sort of schedule overall. We've arranged the major steps in the process to be adopted on or before June 9th of 2020. After talking with Craig, we would prefer to have a dedicated meeting per month on the POCD process. Understand the commission normally meets on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays. And so our thought process was if most of the commission's official business it gets conducted, public hearings and stuff like that on the first meeting of the month, we could dedicate the second to the POCD, or schedule another meeting or a special meeting, or the commission needed to do that. But we'd like to preserve the ability, one meeting a month, if you will, to talk about the POCD. And so that's an overview of the process. The listening sessions are slated to start in August. Normally, we would not suggest we do that. But since we are talking the 4th Wednesday of the month, in this day and age, school's already started by that time. So we think we're going to be okay in terms of the overall schedule by starting then, having the listening sessions in August, September, October, get to draft plan, have a public community input meeting again in January, and then move towards adoption. Thoughts, questions, or feedback on the schedule, the topics, the process?
Any questions from the commissioners for the consultant? Anything to add or any questions for him? Commissioner Woods.
Just on, you had asked the question, how we should approach this, and I agree with your approach of the, doing the public meetings, try to get as much of the public out. We might be successful, we might not, and if not, maybe try to engage them online, but at least try to engage them, face to face first.
I think
it might be somewhat difficult, Craig. I'm not up to date on the building getting torn down in pieces here, so I don't know where those meetings would take place. So that might take a little bit of work on your part, but I'm sure you can work it out. And, even maybe if you have to go to the library or wherever we need to go, the senior center, but I think that's good. I think as much as we can get, feedback and opinions from where because that's basically what we're here for. We're representing them, so we need to get a good feel of what they're looking for and what they want. But I think you did a good job of basically outlining the system again. Pretty simple, what you're looking to do. It's just very time consuming. And I agree with you. I think we should meet on a monthly basis, even if it's a quick meeting.
Yep.
We can, get whatever business we need done and move on.
Yep.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, I would suggest that we meet on the second, every second meeting it be on the agenda. And if we need special meetings, we'll call them as needed.
And welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited. I guess sort of a good news, bad news situation. I've been around enough to have worked on the prior plan and worked in Newington as an acting town planner actually at one point in time, so.
Yep.
Familiar with the community and many of the issues. And sometimes for those of us who live in a community, we think it doesn't change much over time. And one of the things as part of a POCD, we're able to sort of get underneath, pop the hood and start to look at different issues and see what really has changed, and particularly what the changes are that might affect us in the future. And I think that's the real purpose of the planning process, is to make sure our regulations and programs are in place to help guide us effectively in the future. And I get pretty excited about that. So,
Commissioner Woods, you got another question?
One of the things we might have to do is, and I believe that we do change as a community. Somehow we don't change though as individuals, and we need to make sure that light gets brought out, that we are not the same town that we were 25, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. I think that's a really important fact that has to come out. Because we're New Englanders. We hate change, good, bad, and different. We get stuck on our little rut, and just go to one of our schools, and you'll see that the makeup is not what it was, and that's a great thing. Thank you, Mr. Second.
Anything else you want to add at this
no,
point?
I think just to summarize, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll work with Craig to finalize the agreement.
Yeah.
I think based on the feedback from the commission, we're going to go with a public meeting off the bat. We're probably going to try to schedule that for the fourth Wednesday in February, fourth Wednesday in June, simply because that gives us enough time to get the publicity and everything else cooking. If we find a venue that's available on another date, a Wednesday or something like that, we may decide to move it, but I'll coordinate that with Craig. We'll go on the topics and issues which, again, are reflected in our current plan. This is very much an update, and we'll also go ahead with invitations to listening sessions, which will start after the summertime. So thank you. Craig and I have our work cut out for us to get started on this, and I'll be back to see you again in the not-too-distant future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Planner, you have anything you want to add at this point?
No, that's good.
Very much.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is zoning enforcement officer's report. Andy.
Good evening, Commissioners. Before we get to the report, I did have a few temporary sign renewals that have been previously approved by TPZ. They're all for 3 months. Karma's Closet at 3153 Berlin Turnpike, Connecticut Beverage Mart at 3127 Berlin Turnpike, Ivy Bound Test Prep at 107 Fenn Road, and the Stu Leonard's banner that they put up annually, 3475 Berlin Turnpike. They're all the same sign, same location, and were administratively approved. And I do have 2 new sign applications to present. Weight Watchers at 26 Fenn Road has an A-frame sign that meets all of our requirements for temporary signs. They're requesting 3 months. And this is the image here. Just the Weight Watchers logo meets here. And then the other item was a banner at Artichoke Bazille's Pizza at 2391 Berlin Turnpike. That was supposed to get on the last agenda, and it didn't make it. And so I reached out to Frank, and he agreed that as long as it's agreeable to the commission, it's approvable.
Mr. Fox.
To the chairman. Andrew, that's sorry. That's like a 2 foot by 8 foot banner.
It's,
As a temporary sign,
yeah, it's, our banners are calculated off the linear frontage of the building.
Okay.
As opposed to the A-frame signs. So you get a little bit more square footage, and it is in keeping with their linear frontage on the turnpike for the main building.
And these are for, when a new business opens, Mike, we give them a little latitude as to,
yeah, I'm just
exposure.
wondering, that's all, so.
Commissioner,
I had a question on the Karma's Closet. Does that coincide with the McBride Plaza complaint on your page 3 of 9? It doesn't state who the tenant is that violated the action.
Yes, that's correct. That is Karma's Closet there.
Is there, on her application, were there violations in past? I remember years ago, there was, that property was why we started looking and changing the sign ordinance, and it was specific to that property.
I believe that they had one about a year ago. Since I've been here, this is the only time that I've seen it out, and that's all that I know of.
So there's no other, so there's 2 violations prior to her coming here with this
If
application?
that I know of, if you had included this one, yes. Yeah, but they, in their prior violation about a year ago, they did apply for a temporary sign permit, and now this is the renewal for that same sign.
Yeah, they did, eventually, they did. In fact, I think they were the first one to get a A-frame under the then new temp sign regulations.
So how did this come in, just from a lapse of the 3 months?
I saw it on the turnpike and went and spoke with the manager, owner there at the store, and just told her that she needed to renew her sign. So that's where it came. I saw it myself and saw that it was.
I'm not questioning
permitted.
how it came about. I'm trying to question that we've had multiple violations at this address for this applicant, but we keep approving a temporary sign. Thoughts?
Commissioner Fox.
Yeah, through the chairman, these, all the violations, were they before the new regulations? Maybe I'm missing something, maybe I'm wrong.
The only ones that I know of are the 2, about a year ago and very recently in this report. They haven't been actively trying to skirt my zoning enforcement.
So they were in violation of the current new guidelines for temporary signs. I
They
think that's
had
the
a sign
question
out.
he's
yes.
asking.
Yeah.
So they violated it twice.
And then both applied for a temporary sign permit both times. So yes, yeah, you're correct.
Okay. And then my other question, I have a few questions on your list if I,
Go ahead.
you have the 2 Starbucks listed, one on Cedar Street. Is the I'm trying to understand the Starbucks on Cedar Street and Main Street. Is that the one at the old up right over here? Or is that the address for the one that's on Fenn Road in Cedar Street?
Yeah, the Fenn Road is 712 Cedar Street.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Even though it faces Fenn Road, okay. And then you had on page 7 of 9, under Francis Street, 174 Francis Ave, the next one down. Is there an address that's missing on that? I'm trying to,
It is missing on that particular entry, but I think what our computer system is doing is just adding it to the 174 Francis from the previous page.
because there's not a residence at 174 Francis Avenue, that's the old Cashway Lumber.
Right. That is what you're reading there. Resident is the complaint. Who complained? A resident at the TPZ meeting.
Oh, so that line, okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. The other question I have is, I'm seeing a lot of temporary signs at the same complex? Like, we do have the ordinance of how many feet each sign can be from one another, and they can't be within, are we meeting that? with
Yes.
all- I mean,
Yes, I know there's a couple on Fenn Road, but they're all, they all exceed 25 feet separation.
and then with this new one at Fenn Road,
Yeah, yes, they
I mean,
all
like
meet the
here, 44
separation.
Fenn Road, 36 Fenn Road, these are all the same location, just different tenant spaces, correct?
Yes, and I did check the distance to make sure that it exceeds 25 feet.
Anything else, Anthony?
Not at this time, thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions or for the zoning enforcement officer? Okay.
Thank you.
Do we need to do any sort of approval before he leaves?
Yeah, oh,
For
yeah.
for the two.
For the
temporary-
for the temporary signs that he did bring up.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the 2 temporary signs for Weight Watchers and the Artichoke Banner. That's
Yes.
Second.
Motion made, second. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you're all set.
Thank you.
But we're not taking action on the other temporary signs?
The renewal ones, no. The renewal ones, the staff has the
No,
authority.
the renewals have violations. No one wants to discuss that further?
Unless you want to make a motion to deny it on,
I mean, not at this time.
I think some of the violations on it that she had was before she got the permit. Now she has a permit, and apparently she forgot to renew it, so.
It's fine, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is remarks by commissioners. Any remarks at this time? Seeing none. Public hearings, have the secretary read the public hearing notice procedures.
I remember these off the top of my head? Come on. I'll read it. Thank you, Craig. Procedures for public hearings. The order of proceedings at public hearings shall be as follows. A, convening by chairman. B, reading of the notice by the commission secretary or a commissioner designated by the chairman to act in his stead. C, identification and location of the property involved by the town planner. D, a statement of the issue to be considered by the chairman or the town planner. E, presentation by applicant limited to 20 minutes unless a specific extension is granted by the chair. F, persons wishing to speak in favor of the application limited to 2 minutes per person. G, persons wishing to speak in opposition to the application limited to 3 minutes per person. H, rebuttal by the applicant limited to 5 minutes total. I, rebuttal by the opposition limited to 5 minutes total. During a public hearing, it shall be within the discretion of the chairman whether the time limitations should be varied slightly, provided the commission consents to any such variance. In no case shall an extension be more than 20% of the allotted indicated above, or 1 minute, whichever is greater.
Okay, would you read petition 1119, which is item B on the agenda?
Petition 11-19, special permit, section 3.15.3, restaurant outside seating at 3260 Berlin Turnpike, Plaza Azteca. John Kennelly, applicant, Clay-Ben Newington LLC owner, Manuel Rubio, 3260 Berlin Turnpike, Newington, Connecticut. Contact continued from March 27, 2019.
Is the applicant here?
Mr. Chairman, before Attorney Kennelly starts, let me just mention to the commissioners in that folder when you sat down tonight was the new site plan submitted by the applicant today, or maybe yesterday, which shows a 48-foot setback from the curb, okay? And I also prepared a copy of last year's permit with the conditions, just for your memory, and Attorney Kennelly, I can give you a copy also. And a draft motion to approve with space for lots of conditions.
Okay. We, at the last meeting, Commissioner Sobieski asked that the chief of, representative from the police department and the fire marshal's office, please, I see that the chief is here and Fire Marshal Schroeder is here. Would you, if you would like to come and sit at the table and get you in and out of here as fast as we can, Chief?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Obviously, you've heard from me before here, and I'm, even though it's a little out of order, I'd certainly allow them to speak first so that they could maybe speed up their time. I'd be more than willing to defer at this time, making any remarks until.
Why don't you pull up a chair, Chris, and for one for the chief, too, please?
Okay, good. And just for the record, I'm providing Fire Chief Schroeder Clark with copies of the newest version of the diagram.
Okay, Commissioner Sobieski, you were the one that initiated the chief and the fire marshal to come in. Would you have questions or comments that you would like them, or
The
questions?
reason why I
for them?
wanted the fire marshal here to start with was I was a little concerned with the safety of the people inside the building. I'm looking at this plan that's been revised that you have in front of you, and what happened last time, they had a gate in front here, which Attorney Kennelly has removed. But my concern is emergency exiting. Should there be some type of gate north and south if something happens outside where?
I can't see where you're pointing to.
Oh,
so.
I'm sorry. Looking at north and south here, should there be an emergency exit here and here to get people out? That's my question. I don't know if this thing is working or not.
The generator's probably not a good area, and that driveway is a busy entrance and exit from the plaza, so it's probably not a good idea to direct pedestrians in that direction.
I'm just saying emergency, not for entrance and exits.
Well, I think they have a well-defined main entrance, and at the opposite end, a separate entrance. I haven't done the calculations what the occupant load would be, but there may be a requirement for a third entrance that could be used for emergency only.
Okay.
And that, I don't think the generator location is the best, but we could come out to the, in a more central location so they're separate and more remote from each other.
And for Chief Clark, my questions were, last year there apparently was people crossing at Target. I had asked Attorney Kennelly about the possibility of putting an extra police officer up there to stop the crossings on the turnpike. Even though there's a pedestrian button there is not enough time, in my opinion, to get all the way across without getting whacked at a 60-mile-an-hour zone, even though it's 50. And also, the same thing occurs at Richard Street and the Berlin Turnpike there. I realize, that after I had asked you earlier, I had asked the chief about this because I was concerned. I want to make sure that nobody gets killed out there. Every place that somebody's gotten killed out there, this DOT has installed signs, no pedestrian crossing of the Berlin Turnpike. Even though, as Chairman Aida has said, that there is a pedestrian crosswalk pedestal, but there is no flashing walks and there is no defined crosswalk on that road. So that was my concern there.
I mean, that's a legitimate concern for us. And last year, there were issues with pedestrians crossing the turnpike to get to the restaurant. And in fact, the information that we had were that the security guards were assisting some of the patrons in coming across. And I think one of the previous meetings I was watching, and it came up about having a police officer stationed over at Target to prevent people from crossing the highway. That's going to prove very difficult. There's a number of parking lots along the west side of the turnpike. It's not just Target. There's other parking lots where they may be parking and trying to get across, and to have an officer run up and down the curb line to try to prevent people from crossing the turnpike is going to be very difficult. And I'm not an attorney, but I'm not sure if there's going to be, if somebody were to get hit and we're hired to prevent that from happening, is the town going to be held liable should somebody be injured when we're not able to stop them from crossing the turnpike? And, when you hire security guards, you would hope that they're professional and they would work with the police department. But I can tell you the last 2 years, they haven't. There was a case where they were actually charging people an extra $5 to get into the venue. They were assisting people from getting across the turnpike. And there's always going to be a level of impairment. And if they try to cross the turnpike, just the amount of traffic, the visibility, it's going to be hazardous. I'm not here to speak against or in favor of the applicant. I'm just here to try to give you some of the concerns that we dealt with in the last couple of years. There were some trespass tows from IHOP. There were about 12 to 15 cars that were parked there illegally that the business wanted towed from their parking lot. So that was an issue. I know there were issues in the past with Lowe's, with some of the patrons actually going into some of the sheds that were on the boundary of the property of Lowe's. These are the concerns that we have. And Attorney Kennelly is correct in saying there were no disturbances at the venue last year, and that was largely due to the amount of police officers that we had there. They were there to keep the peace and to quell any disturbances, and that was their mission, and they did that, and there weren't any cases last year. The previous year, I believe there was one arrest, and that was a result of a trespass where one of the patrons was told to leave and refused to leave. So as far as arrests and disturbances, they're very few. But the biggest concern that we have is the pedestrians trying to cross the Berlin Turnpike.
Mr. Sobieski.
Chief, let me ask you a question. What would be your opinion if we were to ask to obtain from Attorney Kennelly an insurance naming the town as additional insured? This would cause the town to be held harmless and blameless if somebody gets hurt.
That's above my pay grade.
No, I understand that.
I'm not a litigator, I'm not an attorney.
No, I fully understand that, Chief.
Yeah, that's, the concern I have is creating that nexus where we have an officer that's posted across the street, and their job is to prevent people from crossing the turnpike, which is going to prove to be very difficult. And if somebody gets through and gets hit, my concern is the town's interest in the town being held liable should they decide to file a lawsuit. That's my only concern. I'm not an attorney, but I think it's something that needs to be considered. And if you want to go to the town attorney for advice on that, but I couldn't even begin to tell you.
No, I just was asking what you thought of it, that's all. I understand that fully, Chief. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Anthony.
I have a question for the fire marshal. Have we done an occupant load on the exterior seating? Not yet?
No.
Okay.
It would be based on the square footage of the
Yeah.
open area.
And then may I,
Go ahead.
well, I want to see when I want to address a question. I'll hold that for later, but it's going to coincide with you. But I'll hold the second question. Thank you.
Commissioner Woods.
Chief Schroeder, is that done after the fence is up? Is that how you do it? So you,
Well,
you
we'd have
just-
to have the measurements, so,
so you could do it
usually
from
we
the
do it
scale, if this drawing is
afterwards
the
to
scale,
get
you could
more
do it from
accurate,
that. Okay.
ID.
I just didn't know if you had to wait until like the day of, that the fence goes up to do it, or if it was, if you have a scale drawing, you could do it from that.
There's been
As long
some
as you know
years
the
where,
area.
where they mark it out and we do it that way, but it's always best to do it when the fence is up, because we have to conduct an inspection of that as well and determine the occupant load and egress capacity.
And then you also have people on property, I believe, don't you, or do you not?
No, the fire department does not.
Oh, I thought you
We
did.
had- Well, last year, we had to have people there. I was out of town. Deputy Fire Marshal Dave Woods was on site throughout most of the event. Prior to that, we've had complaints for the last 5 years, which have brought us to the restaurant. But if approved this year, that may be a requirement, because the last 5 years, there's been 2 mandated shutdowns, 1 voluntary shutdown, fire lane violations, open flame devices under unapproved tents, overcrowding conditions. And last year, the previous year, they were allowed to remove the furniture from the restaurant, bar stools, benches, tables, which allowed them to almost double their occupant load, which is allowed under the code with the approval of the local marshal. We didn't allow that last year because it got out of control the year prior to that, and that was something that, we weren't willing to go to approve again, due to the lack of cooperation. Every year, there's been different safety, different personnel involved to manage this project. Every year, there's been promises made, and every year, those promises have been broken. And I think this is a dangerous game that we're playing, because I think someone is going to get hurt if we don't control this event. So if it's approved this year by the commission, there will be fire staff present.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question before I move to the other commissioners? Is that similar to what we do with the police, that they are paid positions?
Yes, they would be.
Yes, okay. Commissioner Clark, I'm sorry, Chief Clark.
I'll be a commissioner tonight.
Sit right here.
My only request, if you do grant this, that they pay us up front. They have a
We'll
history
make
of
sure
of
that,
not paying.
Chief.
Last year was the 11th hour. So I would respectfully request that if it's granted, that they pay us before that date for the services that our officers are going to be providing.
And do you have an idea of how many officers would be required this year?
Last year, at any given time, there were 4 to 5 officers and a supervisor. There could be a total of, I believe there was like 10 or 12 officers. That's just off the top of my head, because they were split in different shifts, because it's a pretty much all-day event.
And does that tax the other areas of town where?
No, because these officers are
Off
separate.
duties?
They're on private duty.
Yeah.
So we have a minimum staffing standards in patrol that aren't breached, and these officers are extra officers that are hired on private duty for the venue.
You have that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Fox?
Through the chairman, Chief Clark, I still have the same concerns that Commissioner Sobieski has, and as far as people crossing back and forth. I don't know how many people that would be there would know that there's a back entrance to Target. Okay, so they might come in there, and whether they go in the back way or on the turnpike, I don't see how a police officer's really, until after 10 o'clock, tell them, they can't go in there. So they go in there, and on the way out, somehow, they're able to cross, in spite of whatever the police officer tells them, and so then they go imbibe and try to come back. So, either way, you guys are going to have a problem.
It's going to prove to be very difficult, just when you look at the area and the access to different parking lots, and it's going to be difficult. And my concern is people are going to slip through and try to get across the highway, and somebody's going to get hit. That's my biggest concern. And there's a saying from a class that I went to. If it's predictable, it's preventable. And if you don't prevent it and you predict it's going to happen, then you suffer the consequences. So those are good words to live by, and I've always lived by them. So there's a legitimate concern that somebody's going to get hit. Just raising the issue.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments or remarks or questions for the chief and the fire marshal? I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to come here and give us this information. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of order.
Yeah.
I'm going to be responding to both of the chief's points, and if they wanted to stick around, obviously,
Why
to
don't
then
you
rebut
just
anything
give
I
them
say.
the opportunity
And
if there's
I'll
any
jump
questions.
right to what they said, and I will cover a little later what the commissioner said, again, just for the time of the chiefs. There was one statement just by you, Chief, regarding the professionalism of the security departments security individuals that we had used in years past. As you know, I took over this little job a year for last year's. And I learned just before the hearing, when I looked at your memo, which was an attachment regarding my employees taking bribes to let more people in. And had I not fired them 2 months before I read your email, I would have fired them that night. And actually, we've hired Aero Security, who is a division of Aeron, which I included just there. There's a page in there from their website. And I spoke to John Reed, who's the senior vice president. That's who I've been dealing with, and they specialize in part in special events. So the idea that I'm going to have a bunch of, and I think I said at the last hearing, am I going to have guys who work at a gym, some guys who work at a construction site, some guys who, I don't know, what, that's not who we've retained for this year to be the private element of the public safety or the security, crowd control. There was obviously, all of us are extremely concerned regarding the crossing of the street and any issues that are posed there. Obviously, to some degree, of course, the most significant thing, and we discussed this last year, the most significant difference, of course, is there's a crosswalk there now, that the city paid for the installation of traffic control devices. In fact, I went out there today, was out there, tested it a few times, timed the lights. Once you get see the red light come on in the center button, and you hear the little chirp, you pretty instantaneously, within a couple of seconds, the north-south road traffic stops, and there is a 45-second wait on the northbound portion. The southbound has a longer wait because when the northbound is released, it releases all traffic, including the turn into the parking lot. This is something that was discussed last year. I will tell you, I really, really wish that had been there last year. Because there would have obviously been a much different situation, which is, and I timed it 3 times. It is a 45-second delay at its shortest element. And the reaction is, and Craig will know better, I'm sure you guys had a lot of hearings on this when Chick-fil-A went in, which was the reason for the installation of this technology, and why you felt you needed it there now. And
Let me just correct you so the record is straight. It was not a request of the commission, it was a request from the Department of Transportation. They're the ones that requested Chick-fil-A to put in the crosswalk apparatus there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the correction. And it is there. So obviously, no matter what, this is a lot safer than from last year. There is now a means to do it. I used it myself a couple times today. That's not to say that we don't want to have this as safe as possible, and I'll stipulate right now that we will add the city of, or the town of Newington as an additional insured for that day and that event. We have a standard $1 million, $3 million, and I believe $5 million umbrella on top of those policies that exist at that site, and we'd be more than happy to add the town as an additional insured if that is something the commission thinks is we should do, and I'm happy to stipulate to that as a condition right now. There had been some discussion regarding that, there were some issues, and this is a party, and it's a big cultural event. It's a big, significant kind of thing, and it's big business to a corporate citizen here in the town. But in 2 years now, once there was a time we called to get somebody off our property who wouldn't get off, and last year we didn't have anything. There was no fighting, no nothing. The really big issue was IHOP, and those were trespass tows, 12 to 15 estimated. And as you've all read, Max has already written a letter to the commission in support of us being here and in support of our application. I think something I do want to address in Fire Marshal Schroeder's issues. You and I met, and we talked about it, and we spoke very frankly about what happened here, and I've given you a copy of this. I believe there's been 3 major changes that have been made to address the idea of capacity, and I certainly invite, and if you remember last year, I offered to pay for an off-duty fire marshal to be there, and you said, no, we'll just swing by and maintain it. More than what made the offer last year, make the offer again. But 3 things have changed to affect the capacity and not have overcrowding. 1, the complete separation and divorce of ingress and egress to the outside area versus the inside area. They will now be fenced completely differently, totally different staff dealing with them, and they're more professional staff. The second being systemic, which is we've gotten rid of these guys who took $5 if you wore a hat to get in, no matter how the capacity was. And third, the commission has stipulated that I have to be there the whole event. One of the things, as you read Commissioner, or Marshal Schroeder's memo, was that I was called at 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. I go to bed before that every day, and so I wasn't available and I didn't pick up. However, I will be standing in the room. Now, that's already been, if they are to approve it, that's a stipulation that I've agreed to and that they are asking for. Unlike last year when your deputy was trying to reach me and I was sleeping, I will be standing there. And I hope that helps address some of the ideas of capacity and overcrowding. And that's just what I have for the points you guys made. I don't want to bother you anymore. Thank you very much for coming, and I apologize you had to come talk to me.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming. Thank you. Okay, I hope commissioners got some good information from the chief and the fire marshal. Help you make a decision on this.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
You want to continue? Go ahead.
Now I'll address some of the concerns raised by the commissioners just themselves. And I apologize, actually, I'm going to talk about one thing. There was a discussion of prepaying. Last year, we prepaid the police their full request for monies for how they estimated staffing levels. There was a statement said that it came the last minute. I personally dropped it off right across from where we're sitting right now, the Friday after the approval was voted on that Wednesday. I needed a day to get the check generated from my client, and I walked in there and hand-delivered it myself. It was, as you know, there were 3 full hearings last year before, so it was only about a week or so before the event, because it was the 3rd Wednesday of the month, and the Cinco de Mayo is basically the first week, so it may have felt a little pushed, but I had it there within 48 hours of the approval of this commission. Also, and as you know, Marshal Schroeder knows, and I said right before him, I offered last year to prepay his staff and agree for them to be there as long as they, for the entirety of the event. So. I have been here enough to know that, to stop talking. I don't know if I've answered everything that's been raised so far, and if I haven't, please remind me. I'm just looking at my notes, and I think I've addressed
Well,
most.
open it up to the commission for any questions. Go, Commissioner.
One question I had is, how are you dividing the building so that people from outside don't go in from the patio seating area that faces the Berlin Turnpike, et cetera?
If I may,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
One of the points I was making earlier is that a way to stop overcrowding in the interior is to have ingress and egress from the restaurant. The interior, also known restaurant, is totally independent from this. Now, your question, how do you make sure people don't get,
Well, there's multiple doors around the front and sides of that building, meaning the facing the Berlin Turnpike and then south. I think there's an exit south too, of how, kitchen staff, delivery staff, you get a couple hundred people, that becomes, just keep that door open and prop it. Now you're going to get that ingress, egress of outdoor folks that you're calculating one way, and indoor folks you're calculating other, and are we going to have a plan to not mesh them? Which I don't understand how you would, but I don't, please advise.
sure, the problem that we had in the years past, we've never had an issue with this exit. We've maintained it, and it's an exit only, and that's really because you didn't want, if there was a big crowd over here, you wouldn't want them to have to get all the way over there to get out. This is an exit only. There's security there all day. In fact, last year, the police were actually, their cars were all kind of staged here, so they were over there also. So this is an exit only. The question you had is, I assume, is that there's a door to the patio, a service door for customers who are on this.
It's an
small
exit,
patio.
egress, exit door that's calculated for that building.
Yep, for this building onto that. There is a gate, there's a small, which is also required by law for the egress of this, there's a small gate here. And we have had security posted, and usually one of the interior police officers standing right up here. But that's all, there is no ingress, egress. That's about a 2.5-foot brick wall with then wrought iron ornamental that comes up to about 4.5 feet. But there is a push bar exit, which is required by law. This for a second egress from that, from the outdoor patio. There is security always posted there, and usually one of the cops who's hanging out there too.
So you can only be in the building or out of the building? Those are the only two options.
Yep, you can, and if you want to go from outside the building, you have to exit all the way this way, come back, get back into this, and deal with a whole different people doing clickers here. What we had last year is that I had it all concentrated here, and you had bleed over. I mean, it was a design failure.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
There was a design failure. Getting in to the restaurant is only allowed through this. It's totally separate from this. That's why I made that point where the fencing is absolutely independent. Only one entrance. There's a, that's an emergency push bar because of that. That's an exit only. But entrance is only through here. And then even to get there, you have to already have gotten in there. I know that's not going to come well in the record, but one of the points of this design was to make them truly independent spaces, and that we thought would make you sure that you couldn't have what I read in the memo from Chief Clark, which was somebody taking $5 because you're wearing a hat and you get to slip in. Using those little hand things is totally different from these two spots.
One other question. Is there going to be outdoor entertainment? Because I'm trying to figure out why you need a generator.
Oh, because it does go until after sundown.
Okay.
So there's lights and, lights put out here. The generator is one of those things gets hooked to like a truck. It isn't, I think there was a mention of a pad last time. It's not permanent.
So it's just the generator is for the outdoor lighting?
Yep.
But no, you don't have any bands or?
No bands. I believe there is some outdoor speakers.
Okay.
And I think that's been true of every year. There's some speakers wall mounted here, but they're about that big.
Okay.
There'll be some ambient music, as there has been every year of the thing. We've never had a noise complaint.
Okay, no, I just.
Unsurprisingly with the highway going by, but.
No, I'm good. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? You have anything else, Attorney
I'll just
Kennelly?
look at my notes quickly.
Oh, yeah, that's what I did.
Commissioner Sobieski.
There was one thing.
Attorney Kennelly, just to make sure I understand, so you are going to obtain independent insurance for the town, naming the town of Newington as additional insurer, which means it will hold the town of Newington harmless in case something gets hurt. Am I correct?
Been a lawyer for 22 years, much of it practiced around either restaurants and also insurance. So it isn't, the insurance policy doesn't say, what it says is, we'll pay for you getting sued in cost of defense and indemnification. Just to be clear, I don't want to misstate what an additional insured. What it does is it becomes, if someone did sue the town of Newington, it says, well, your insurance doesn't pay for it. This insurance pays for the defense, that is the cost of lawyers and things like that, and indemnification, that is the cost of any settlement or jury award that's found against you. So adding you additional insured, it doesn't indemnify you so much as it provides if you get, it pays for the lawyer, it pays for the settlement, it pays for the jury award if that happened. Now, if we're going, and through you, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up with you, if that's something we want to do, I would say it's going to be for just May 5th. It'll be for a single-day event, additional insured, and it'll be for the limits of what is on the premises, the same limits as the premises, which is, I believe, 1, 3, and 5. 1 million, 3 million, 5 million umbrella.
You said you've been an attorney, so you know as well as I do, you go after whatever entity has deeper pockets, which would be the town of Newington. That's my concern. I want to make sure the town, let's assume somebody goes across that highway and gets hit. Okay? Crosswalk, no crosswalk, people don't, I want to make sure the town is protected as much as possible. That's all I'm concerned with here.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to you, Commissioner Sobieski, I have no problem with that. As I said, one of the first thing I said was, well, we'll make you an additional insured just for the day. So if it doesn't have, and that's fine by me. That's not a problem. You call your broker. I've done this for in other places for events. The issue is, what is the number? What I just said is 1, 3, and 5. and that's 1 million, 3 million, and 5 million.
Any other question, Commissioner?
Attorney, you had stated a name, Max. Who is this Max?
He's the franchise owner of IHOP.
Okay.
They were the ones that were most significantly impacted by our event, and they had 12 to 15 estimated by the police of trespass tows.
Okay. So,
He is in support and has, on the record, I know through you, Mr. Chairman, that you, Commissioner Claffey, was not here at the beginning of this public hearing.
but I was here at last year, and I'm going to ask the same question because we do have new tenants in there. The same question of the overflow parking and the other restaurants that are there have the right to their parking. And I think I could go back to last year's notes that I had asked for whoever owns the property to clarify that all the tenants that rent space on that property are okay with this, with the overflow parking, because IHOP is the closest one, but now you have Chick-fil-A, but they're not there on Sundays, which I think this year's a Sunday.
It is a Sunday, and that's
So-
Bobby Stewart, owner and operator of Chick-fil-A,
So,
who I'm sure you're familiar with.
no, I'm not, but I'm more concerned now of the parking, the cleanup, and all that stuff. Like, how do we, the event's done, and then Monday morning comes, these businesses come in, and garbage, trash, all that. I mean, is that something your client is willing to?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to you, Commissioner, again, I know you weren't here last hearing. We had put up last year, pre-event, a $3,000 surety. We gave a $3,000 check, and if you look in your packet, you'll see from the Department of Public Works that no services were used to clean up anything from our event because we were cleaning up during and cleaning up immediately after, and therefore that $3,000 check was returned. I would again agree to, giving the surety, but, that was the first time that was done. There was nothing, no problem with any of that, but if that was something that the commission felt was necessary to do again, I'm comfortable with doing it, but, we were pretty good about that, and we got a clean bill of
Oh,
report.
I understand. I just want to make sure that it's, just because you're good last year doesn't mean we don't hold you to the same standard this year. So, or your client, not you, but the client. So, okay.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, actually, this year, I have to go to this thing. So
I just,
I'm being held personally
discussion
responsible.
here on that topic. It's up to.
Just one thing, according to my notes, it was a 5,000 bond?
Sure.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to you, Mr. Planner, 5,000, whatever, yeah. It was returned.
Commissioner Woods, you had a question. And then Mr.
Thank you,
Fox.
Mr. Chairman. I also wasn't here on the last meeting, but have you secured permission to park at Chick-fil-A on Sunday?
No, we don't plan to. We talked to them, and that again is Bobby Stewart, who is the owner and operator. We didn't ask him to use his parking. They don't allow parking on Sundays on their property. I think someone mentioned, and I confirmed that they put cones up so they don't allow public parking when they're not using it. They're a new neighbor. Wasn't going to get into trying to rent it on a Sunday from them. We just asked them, do you have any problems with this? You know about it? There's a hearing. Would you come talk ahead of it, for it? And Mr. Stewart said, I got no problem with it. We're closed. You're not going to have any impact on us. And we didn't get into trying to rent his parking lot from him.
Okay. And so, can you walk me through where are your patrons going to park then?
Well, they'll park on our premises, and you'll see, the same spaces and same area they used last year pretty successfully, except for those 12 spots that were, taken by, that ended up being trespass tows. There's no complaint from Richard Stotler, who was the manager the last time when we did this and came out in support of this event, and has no problem with it. There was no big problem with him on this. They're going to use the parking spots we have. They can find, other issues. We only had a 12 to 15, by the police's own estimation, we only had a 12 to 15 parking spot problem.
Mr. Planner, did we get any complaints last year from a budding other than the IHOP?
Right,
from
not,
getting neighbors?
not that I recall. When I prepared my notes for this meeting a month ago, I went back through the minutes and everything, and I don't remember seeing anything about a complaint from the merchants. Just just the IHOP, the tow trespass.
It rained, which probably kept attendance down a little bit, but does anybody remember, was Ruby Tuesdays open at that point? or closed?
It was closed.
Closed.
It was closed.
So that probably helped a lot.
Commissioner Fox,
All right, thank you.
you had a question?
No, Stephen, they answered that.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, we're going to open it up to the public now. Anyone from the public wishing to speak in favor of this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Diana Sarah, 237 Reservoir Road. Last year, when they came forward with this, there was a lot of questions and a lot of concerns that you guys had, and you asked them to follow through on stuff. Well, that evening, I decided to take a ride myself to go see if things were followed in place. One, we stopped and we talked to a few people over there and asked if Mr. Connelly was there, because you had asked him that he stay on the premises that day, and he had left. This was about 6 o'clock that evening. On top of it, we stopped over at IHOP, and I went inside and talked to the assistant manager, because the manager was not working that day. And she said that people are parking in their spots, and that they were, the individuals were coming into the restaurant, getting water, using the bathroom, and then going across and going over to Plaza Azteca. So when their patrons were coming in, they had no place to park. So I went outside and walked over to one of the security guards and asked them, these spots are supposed to be for the IHOP individuals, and same with over on this side. Can you please ask these people to move their vehicles? And they were just coming in, still parking there. And he looked me right in the eyes and said, I'm not saying anything to anybody. They're going into Azteca. So if we have security in place that's supposed to be doing something, but they're not doing it, why just hiring a different security company is it going to change? The assistant manager at IHOP that night, it was almost empty in there. And on a Saturday night, that place is not empty. So I'm very concerned for the businesses around there. And the whole back parking lot was filled all the way up into the Lowe's area. So there was not any parking over there for people. People were across the street. I literally witnessed people running and dodging cars on the Berlin Turnpike coming across. It's very concerning that if somebody gets hit in this town just crossing that street. So it's your decision how you want to play this, but I just thought I should put my 2 cents in. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, you have an opportunity to,
1 minute or
Yeah.
5%. I just would like a couple of things to be made very clear that are already in the record. One, if we review the stipulations for the issuance of the permit last year, there was no requirement that I be on the premises the entire time. I was on the premises, was there, the health department was there with the police, there, one of the fire marshal's assistants inspections, but I did go home. I went home. Had you made the same stipulation that is being suggested this year, I would have been there. But let's just be clear, that was not a stipulation, and I would ask the chair to to the town planner to confirm that that was not a stipulation that I be there. Secondly, there is some concern, and we've all talked about IHOP, and we've all talked about the impact of the 12 to 15 trespass tows that had to occur there. I think nothing about IHOP's parking and the impact on IHOP business speaks louder than the letter I got from the owner of IHOP, which said, I'm in support of your application. I understand that, there had to be some tows there, but really there's just one person that gets the final say on if IHOP is going to be, should support us, and that's IHOP, and IHOP has spoken. And that is, they support us. Mm-hmm. And the last one being, I think we have all explored the idea of people crossing the street. It's invariably safer now that the DOT forced the implication of that control device, but we are willing to do whatever additional things, such as we've said, putting a police officer there. That is something that we're more than happy to pay for and prepay for there, in fact. And that's it. I've talked to you guys a lot, and I know I bore you at a point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners.
Need some action from the commission as to whether to leave this open or close it, and where to move it to. Commissioner Claffey.
The question I have is leaving it open because we don't have a occupant load calculation from our fire marshal or anything in writing of how many people can be outside, how many can be inside. I think in years past, Mr. Planner, there was some of that stipulated before we made a vote on a yay or nay basis, if I do recall.
Well, yeah, I'm reading last year's approval. The condition number 1 was the indoor occupancy shall be limited to the number normally authorized by the fire marshal, comma, which TPZ believes to be 164. And number 2, the outdoor occupancy shall be limited to 300 persons. So,
And I only asked that question because the person who makes that determination was here, has left, hasn't even been given the information to make that determination. So I don't know how we could make a determination on a stipulation if we don't calculate it by law as a commission.
right. Well, you could certainly, as a condition of approval, indicate that both indoor and occupancy shall be limited to the number approved by the fire marshal, and that decision be made some number of days before the event.
I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, that seems
Commissioner Fox.
reasonable.
I would also like to keep it open for the same reason that Commissioner Claffey does. Plus, came into my head while Attorney Kennelly was just rebutting the public part of the public Counselor Sarah, that I'm not too sure what he means, what Max, quote unquote, over at IHOP means by "I support you."
Well, it's in the letter, the rather
I don't
incoherent
know,
letter, but I think
yeah,
the intent of the
but
letter was to be
When
supportive.
when he says support him, does he mean, one, you are able to park cars, your clients will be able to park cars on my property, or that,
Just like last year.
if we have to tow, we have to tow. So I'm not too sure. I'd like to keep it open.
I just want to remind the commission that this event is on May 5th. Our next meeting is when?
24th.
24th.
Right.
We would have to close the meeting the next time and take action that night so that he hasn't, we're cutting it kind of close. I mean, one of the problems he had last year was that we closed the hearing and he had to run over with the check to give to the police department. The police department was not happy that it wasn't there sooner, and so just keep that in mind when you, if you would like to keep it open, that's fine with me. Is that someone make a,
Make a motion, close the meeting,
close the
Aye.
meeting?
The hearing.
close the hearing,
And do
Second.
what?
It was seconded.
move to old business.
Move it to old
Vote on it
business
for
for
next
tonight, or to the next
action
meeting?
tonight?
Yes.
Okay,
Second.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there discussion on the motion? Commissioner Claffey.
My discussion would be just on the stipulations that would have to be compiled, be it the occupancy load, interior, exterior, like you just said. That'd be the only thing to discuss tonight. Or, go ahead.
If I can, I think no matter what we came up with tonight, the fire marshal would trump it anyways. If we were, right, if we came up with an occupancy level that was too high, and he calculated now it's the 300, it's going to be 300. Doesn't matter that we said 334. He's going to win that argument, as he should. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the wording that we could do, if we do approve this, is that it's based on the fire marshal's determining factor as the size of what the occupancy load should be.
Commissioner Sobieski.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think that whatever the fire marshal comes up with for seating outside and occupancy, seating inside and occupancy outside would be his call, and that would be put in as a stipulated, whatever the fire marshal says. Okay? Secondly, I think that should have a full, if the fire marshal agrees, have a full-time fire marshal there to check the premises.
I think that's, I hope that, I'm sure that the planner has been taking notes on when we were having a discussion of.
I think we're getting
and
ahead of
putting-
ourselves though now,
yeah.
right? We need to, that would be done in old business, right? When we move it to old business, we do that.
True, but it's good to discuss what might be the conditions now while the hearing is still open, so if you say something that's really onerous to the applicant, he'll have the opportunity to say,
All right, that's
Yeah.
good thought.
And also taking Chief Clark's comments, I think these things should be paid well in advance, and whatever the chief decides the total number of officers needed. Apparently, there's 2 shifts in there, so you're probably talking 12 officers, plus a supervisor, or 5 officers plus a supervisor. So I think they need to be paid well in advance, not run over there because scheduling of the timing and stuff like that, vacations and stuff. So I think the sooner Attorney Kennelly, if this is passed, the sooner Attorney Kennelly gets the money in there, the better off we're going to be, and we're going to be able to schedule things. Thank you.
Commissioner Fox, any any comments?
I would vote to close the hearing, but I think I would have to put it on the next meeting's old business. I know, there's a time limit here, but I don't know. Have you have all the conditions you want on there, or that we want on there?
wrote them.
That's all I'm worried about.
You want me to?
well, we could recap
Review.
the conditions that we've been kicking around, so, yeah, Commissioner.
I wrote, these are what I was kind of recapping, because I probably would be the one reading it. Approved occupancy levels calculated by fire marshal. Number 2, should have, or the attendance of a fire marshal at the property during the event. And then the 3rd is police staff directed by Chief Clark with proper payment made to Newington Police Department for their services, or
Paid
Attorney
for the fire
Kennelly there.
marshal. No, for the fire marshal too.
paid fire marshal.
I'd like to add that Attorney Kennelly be present.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Oh, I didn't want to, but you guys are forgetting the insurance?
5 insurance.
Oh, we're not forgetting.
Oh, okay, I
No.
just didn't hear.
Yeah,
was gonna bring
the
that.
additional insurance, as Attorney Kennelly just mentioned. Also, I'd like to make sure that Attorney Kennelly is on the premises from the start to finish.
Right, and then the last one was the $5,000 cash bond. And that's, okay, and those are all the ones that I had also.
Well, it's still open. It starts at noon and ends at, the outdoor ends at 10, and the indoor ends at 1, because that's the statutory close. Can I get there like 3 or 4? 'Cause, like, nothing happens in the early afternoon. Like,
That's what you say now.
Whatever.
Oh, did I?
Commissioner Fox.
The one thing I would like to add, and, we want the representative of the fire marshal's office there through the whole event. I would like to see them there, see the marshal there maybe an hour before to make sure, make sure it's set up properly, and maybe even, staying a little afterwards.
Any other questions, any other additions to the laundry list of conditions, if this is approved? So you have a motion to move it to old business, to,
Close and move to old business.
all in favor of that
For
motion?
action tonight.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we'll move it to old business and act on it and discuss it some more and act on it tonight, one way or another. Okay, next item on the agenda, we want to read 0319.
Excuse me. Petition 03-19 zoning text amendment, section 3.11, section 3.17, and section 6.11. Motor vehicle service uses, town plan and zoning commission applicant continued from March 27, 2019.
Is the planner here?
Yes, still here, sir.
Okay. There's 2 issues that we have to clarify, or there's a couple of issues that we have to clarify. One was the distance requirements from, either we're going from, I believe it's 100 feet. And the second is the garage doors facing the road. And also the new and used car dealerships. So those are the items we want to discuss. I'll open it up to Commissioner on those three items. Commissioner Fox.
Well, as far as new and used, as the definition, states that a new car dealership can sell used cars. I don't know. I asked this at the last meeting. I mean, can we not allow a straight used car dealership?
Yes, you can. You can,
So
because...
we can deny a straight used car dealership.
It's a complicated answer, so bear with me, and it was in the agenda packet. But the definition of a new car dealer is a dealer who has a relationship with a manufacturer, with Toyota, Chrysler, GM, whatever, or an importer for a foreign car. He has a relationship with the car manufacturer. He needs to have that relationship to be a new car dealer. If he has that relationship, if he is the local Toyota dealer, he can also sell used cars, but he has to be a bona fide new car dealer before he can to be allowed to also sell used cars. So yes, if you allow a new car dealer, expect that there will be some used cars being sold, but he has to be a bona fide new car dealer first before he can also sell used cars.
Is that what you...
That's, if you read the definition of new car dealer, that's how a new car dealer is defined.
So by definition, a new car dealer with a relationship, well, of course, the used cars will generally be trade-ins, we would assume. But if he wants to go to a wholesaler and pick up a couple used cars to sell, he would be able to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
If you allow new car dealers, yes.
That answers my question.
Commissioner Camillo.
No, nothing to say at the moment.
Okay,
Let everybody
Commissioner
else say something
Sobieski.
first.
Just one quick thing, Mr. Planner. Let's assume I had a dealership with GM. I lose the dealership with GM, but I still have an auto business. What would be the outcome?
Well, it sounds like you would, if you lose your dealership, if you lose your relationship with GM, then I would assume, I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume, and I'm not an inspector for the motor vehicles, but I would assume that means you're now no longer your license to be a new car dealer is void, because you're no longer a new car dealer,
Right.
and everything that goes with that is now void.
That would also void the used car portion of it, too.
If you are no longer a new car dealer,
Okay,
then
that's
you would
what I
then
wanna
have
make sure
to try to get a used car dealership license from the state.
Commissioner Woods.
If we eliminate used car dealers, that would also eliminate, like, CarMax, correct?
Yes.
You can't have one without the other. And CarMax, while they do sell used cars, pretty much looks like a new car lot, as far as
They
that.
also do sell new cars.
Do they?
Well, then it depends what kind of license they have. But I'm not sure. Well, again, if you look at the definition of a new car dealer, he has to have a relationship with a manufacturer or an importer. So I'm not sure how CarMax could be a new car dealer in Connecticut.
They are. They
How-
are new car dealers. They have agreements, maybe not currently in the state of Connecticut, but they have them across the country,
Oh, in other states,
in other states.
but not in
Just
Connecticut.
not here, but doesn't mean that if you put something in like that, you'd be precluding them from being able to possibly come in.
Correct.
So are the new and used car dealerships, I'm assuming they're not banging on your door and asking you if they can come to Newington, are they? I mean,
They're not banging on my door. They may be talking to Andy Brecken, but no. Yeah.
But they
I
exist in town
mean,
already.
is it
Yes.
because of our zoning regulations, or is it because
I don't
know.
know.
the market just isn't here as far as they're concerned? You don't know.
Yeah, I don't
Nobody's
know.
knocking on your door. They haven't knocked on your door in a while. So I-
Correct. New car dealers,
So are we
yeah.
overthinking this?
Possibly.
I don't think we should preclude any business from coming to town, but.
Commissioner Camillo, you got, no?
I was gonna say, the goal with this was try to get something that is cohesive, that will work, and actually, I believe, help some of the businesses that are now operating in this town as non-conforming and get them back to conforming. I thought that was the goal we were trying to achieve. So I think whatever we can do to continue to further that, I'm in support of.
So how does that fit in now?
When you say, how does that fit in, I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Is the new car, is the dealership part of the regulation as you have written?
Right, okay.
I don't believe it is. I don't believe that it's included. Or it's not mentioned.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Okay, right.
How did they treat it in the past, before 2007?
I'd have to do some research to answer that question. But to answer your question about what does the draft currently say, the draft currently says that the commission may grant a special permit for the service, sale, repair, rental, or storage of motor vehicles in certain zones only. And that's what it's read, pretty sure from the beginning. And the title of this category has always been service, sale, repair, rental, or storage. We just haven't really been talking about the sale aspect until the last meeting.
So we only allow it by special permit, no matter how they're going to do it.
Correct.
And that's the way we would
Yeah.
want it to be.
And I have one other question, because I wasn't here, and I did read through the minutes. Why do we need to go back to a public hearing if we went from the 100 to 50?
Right.
Can you help me with that?
Right, okay. The issue has been raised that if the commission decides to adopt a regulation different from what was advertised, let's put it that way, then people who perhaps chose not to come to the hearing because they read what was published and then they figured, oh, that doesn't bother me, I have no problem with that, I'll stay home. If the commission ends up adopting something significantly or substantially, whatever those words mean, different, then there's a question of whether we truly told the public what we were going to be discussing, and then it's a bait and switch sort of thing. So on the town attorney's recommendation, if it looks like the commission is going in the direction of adopting a regulation that's less protective of residents, in other words, the 50-foot buffer instead of the 100, if that's the direction the commission wants to go, the town attorney recommends having another public hearing expressly, publicly to discuss, and everyone knows it, the 50-foot setback buffer instead of requiring a 100-foot buffer.
I don't want to beat this to death, but is that only because we didn't discuss going from 100 to 50 during the public hearing portion?
No, because it wasn't in the draft that was posted with the town clerk prior to the meeting, and it wasn't in a copy of the draft that was sent to CROG prior to the meeting.
Okay. See, I thought the whole thing was open where there was some suggested changes. I just thought we could do whatever we wanted. But you need to be a little bit more specific, right?
Right.
I'm not against having public input. That's not my point, but I'm just trying to understand. I'm trying to wrap my arms around it. So.
Right, and over the years, we've always, or very frequently, adopted a regulation that was slightly different from what was originally advertised. It's a question of how different is what got adopted from what was advertised. And it's been suggested that maybe a 50-foot buffer is significantly different from a 100-foot buffer.
And I think people should have the ability to come out. I'm not against it. I'm just trying to understand it. Thank you.
I think that my position. My position has been that I think that the 100-foot is not adequate to protecting residents in these instances. But I will concede to what the commission wants and the majority of the commission. But to drop it to 50 feet, I think, is unreasonable at this point. I think it's been 100 feet, and I think that to relax it anymore would be a disservice to the residents.
Well, I think it's the opposite. I think what it used to be 50 feet, and then this commission is thinking of adopting a greater buffer.
Well, that's what we advertised, was 100 feet.
Correct. Right.
I think for,
I'll belabor it some more.
huh?
I don't disagree with you if we were starting the process new, and it was a new community, we were, opening up a new section of town, and it was more planned development, where now we're trying to develop in little niches. And I'm not saying we don't protect our residents. I think that's obviously what we're here for. But I think we can see on these maps that when you start drawing these lines that are solid and can't be bent, at every one of these little intersections every now and then, we have a problem that, oh, well, we thought this was all commercial land, but wait a minute, it butts up to residential.
But from what I understand, it's not a significant difference between the 50 and 100 as far as the affected pieces.
Well, it's subjective.
Yeah.
What one person considers significant, another person might consider not significant.
Mr. Sobieski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as I'm concerned, I'd like to see the 100-foot buffer. I want to protect the residents as much as possible. I agree with Chairman Aida that maybe 100 feet is not enough, but it's better than 50. It's when you're in your yard or when you're home, you want to have some type of a buffer from the activities that are next to it. So I would be in favor of the 100-foot.
Okay, let's talk about the doors face. Go ahead,
Just so we can be
Steve.
clear, is this the 100-foot and 50-foot
Right.
for any automotive use, correct? That's what we're talking about.
Correct.
For any
Right.
automotive use.
And you realize that these are all special permit
Right.
applications? Okay.
I just wanted clarification, we're talking about new and used car dealers only.
No, we're talking about everything.
I didn't-
No,
Right,
we're
gas-
talking the whole.
gas-
Belabored the new
Right,
and
gas
used, then we-
stations, car
Oh,
washes,
Gotcha,
yes,
okay.
everything.
Okay, let's talk about the doors facing the street.
I'll go first.
Steve.
I don't have an issue with the doors facing the street. Again, I think that we have the capability today as a commission to put buffering in place, whether it be landscaping, fencing, some sort of buffering, just mounds of earth, to try to make the doors go away as much as possible. But I think that we're developing pieces of property that no matter where you put the doors, no one's going to like it. So they might be on the turnpike, facing the turnpike directly, and yet the building is just a little square, and you see more of that door if you're coming north or south versus if it was, just driving by it for the 50 feet, you don't see it. But, I'm prejudiced. I think we could do it other ways. I might be in the minority.
Commissioner Claffey.
I have to agree with Commissioner Woods. I don't think the doors are that much of an issue based on how construction and designing and making doors look like the rest of a building can be done, have been done in other communities. Just like you can go and see a old telephone or power building that they made look like a single-family home, but inside it was four walls. Inside it was all the power generating devices. I don't know if Newington has any. I know some surrounding towns do. So it's the same concept of we make other buildings in town look like buildings in that same neighborhood. I think with these doors, with technology and construction material, that you can make them look like the facade of a building and not look like a door, and actually be a door.
The problem, I think, is more that the people that run these operations have, when the doors are facing like the Berlin Turnpike, when they're operating, the doors are up and you could see their whole operation inside. And I think
No, I don't disagree, but
I mean, that's the logic, I believe. That's the logic. I don't know, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, I'm just telling you.
Gotcha.
That's what I get out of all of these meetings. Commissioner Sobieski.
No, I remember when DOT came in and Joe Klutt was the chairman, they made him put a berm up and hide the doors at the DOT building.
Right.
And I believe part of that was for the aesthetics of the turnpike. And again, as Chairman Aida alluded to, when they're open, you can see what's going on inside. So I would not be in favor of putting doors in front of the building.
Commissioner Fox.
I know,
Here, we're weighing in on this.
no, I'd rather keep that restriction.
Commissioner Camillo, you have something to add, or no?
There's 24 dealerships in Newington, and then there's probably another 15 repair garages. So, I mean, what kind of harm are we gonna do to them?
As far as what?
Not complying.
We're talking about the doors.
Right.
You're saying,
You can't make, I think, you know, you take, I hate to use, what's the body shop right there by DQ?
Turnpike Motors.
Turnpike, you know, he's on that property's kind of situated where if they wanted to grow, would they be able to grow and become more non-conforming if they wanted to add a bay? It's kind of hard to have some of these places want to stay in town. If we institute changes, then they become non-complying or
And if you,
non-conforming, excuse me.
if you make your bays go north and south on the turnpike, you see them first anyhow. You're watching them all the way down the highway. And that's sort of what you're trying to get away from, looking at those bay doors. Well, now you're gonna see them from a half mile away instead of 100 feet as you drive by.
you could make stipulations on approvals when you, these are special permits, that they, during business hours, that the doors are kept closed. And you could get around it. There's just a suggestion. I'm not suggesting that we change it or not. Go ahead.
I think if the argument that you want to put out is aesthetics, I think, again, you can do some things to help that. But if the issue is really more noise, I think what you're going to see in the very near future, because it's already started, they're moving away from pneumatics and going now into all battery-powered equipment. So the noise levels are going to start coming down. And I think that's the biggest objection from abutting property owners, is the noise level. And that high-pitched sound from those air guns, that's almost a thing of the past. They're all moving now into battery-operated tools.
Devices.
So,
Commissioner Fox?
Well, case in point, as Commissioner Woods said, the main thing is, the Firestone. I mean, the people that live nearby were just worried about, about the noise of the pneumatic tools, and I agree. There's not so much noise left anymore. As far as aesthetics, and as Commissioner Claffey said, they can all, be made to look good and and not upset people.
It's a special permit. You got a lot of latitude as a commission as to what these things are going to look like and what you approve and what you don't approve.
I mean, you can make solid doors, right, if they did in fact face the street?
Commissioner Claffey, you got some?
I had a question. I just thought with Commissioner Camillo said you have an existing, and this is a question for you to think about, existing garage door facing. Would they have to come for a special permit if they wanted to add on to their building?
Well, yes, they would have to get a special permit to expand the building. They would not be allowed to put in an additional door if you adopt this prohibition. But yes, they would have to come before you.
If they're complying now, but if they're not adding any doors, and they're just adding to the back of their building, like a 40 by 40 storage facility for
They'll have
used
to come
parts.
It's 10% they have to come to us.
But does that mean then they have to get a special permit because they're under this cloud of?
Well, anytime
because
somebody.
they have garage doors that maybe face or do not
Well,
face.
but not for that reason. They'll have to come before you. They have to come before you for what I'll call a modified special permit anyway, because,
Because they're under an original special permit?
yes, right.
Yeah, it's beyond the doors at this point.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing is, most of these new businesses would have to be on the turnpike because neighborhood garages have gone away. We don't have the zoning for it. The gas stations in the neighborhoods have gone away. So you have the turnpike, and you're making it where it can't happen. Now, what are we, acre, 2 acres you gotta have for a parcel too?
That's eliminated.
That's eliminated?
Right.
Okay.
What about in the, like, North Mountain Road area, which is separate from the pike, but they have they've come in here before, multiple loading docks and,
Those is an industrial area.
And it would be allowed there by special permit also.
Now, the other thing, special permit, would that have to go to ZBA
No.
Comes here.
or dealer's license?
Oh, the dealer's license, it's changed several times in the last couple of decades. I think at the moment, the legislature has put that authority on the TPZ.
Well, there are other towns that's still ZBA, like West Hartford's the ZBA. And
That's whatever the state law requires is what we would do. And at the moment, it's the TPZ that has responsible for location approval.
Any other,
We're still in a public hearing, correct?
Yes.
yes,
So-
yeah.
I believe there's some members in the audience that might come up and,
Yeah, we're gonna open it up to
Back
the
up.
audience, but I think that we have to vet this thing ourselves.
I did, and I'm glad we did, and I hope we now get some more feedback.
Yeah, we're gonna keep this, there's no rush to, we wanna get this right one time. I don't wanna be revisiting this again. So at this point, if there's no other questions from the commissioners, I'll open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Robert Menta, 3455 Berlin Turnpike, Modern Tire. I'm in favor of, obviously, addressing the regulations and, bringing new ones in that create a level playing field for all auto uses that are in town. First of all, I'd like to thank the commission for addressing the auto regulations. It's my hope that we do get these regulations put in place, so as I just stated, we can adequately have a level playing field for all the validly existing approved auto uses, and that they become conforming auto uses. Along those lines, I do have some comments in regards to the proposed regulations and some of the comments that you folks had made just a few minutes ago. I understand your position regarding used car dealers, but I believe that you can achieve a professional image by setting guidelines for used car dealers. Commissioner Woods has mentioned CarMax. You look at it, it's like a brand-new car dealership. So I think one of the biggest things you could do is, first of all, you do say, as Mr. Minor mentioned in the regulations, the sale, service, and repair of autos. So sale is in there. So I think that new car dealers and used car dealers should be allowed, but with guidelines. And just as an example, let's have no popped hoods out there with the for sale signs in them, no banners waving on the antennas, things like that. So you can get a professional image as long as you institute guidelines. In section 6.11.2, in a couple meetings ago, I had mentioned the repairs that were being done outside of a building. And in here, it still says that all repairs shall be entirely within a building and at least 30 feet from any street line. Again, I would like to stress to the commission that O'Reilly's is going to install batteries, Auto's going to put on wiper blades, Advanced Auto Parts is going to pop a bulb in or something like that. We have unapproved uses that motor vehicle doesn't require to have a license. I have a license in my business. The other businesses in town have licenses. We should have the ability to go out and pop a battery in a car, put a wiper blade on, something minor. And again, if you can have stipulations and the regulations that kind of curtail it, so we're not doing a brake job out in a parking lot, you don't want to see that. But if you said something that was serviced within 30 minutes or less than an hour, and if someone came by for zoning and they saw the same vehicle out there and it was jacked up and the spare tire was still off and it was 30 minutes, we'll come down and, just like the sign regulations, gives a citation or something. I just think that's not only fair, I just think it's smart. Let's have a regulated entity do the work on vehicles that people are driving, and they're doing them on shops that aren't regulated. It just makes sense. It's nonsensical not to do that.
Bob, it's happening now, and it's not being enforced, where the zoning enforcement officers coming out there and saying, don't put the wiper blades on. We don't want to overcumber the regulation with so much stuff. The simpler, the better for us. If you try to address every kind of situation that could possibly come up, the regulations would be thick as the Bible, or thicker.
Right, so I wonder, would it be better just to leave it out? Would it be better just to leave it out? And not even address it at all? I mean,
The car wash.
No, it's
And the baby out with the bathwater. No. I
But
think,
then you're putting a stipulation on this style business, but you're not on the other guy who does half a dozen of the same things that his or someone
Right.
else's company does.
Have you ever been stopped from doing it?
no, but I'm going by the regulations. So if someone wanted to say, hey, Modern Tire, I saw you put a wiper blade on out there, and, I don't like you. So we're going to call up the town, and they're going to come down, and they're going to enforce the regulations.
Well, no, they don't have to.
Create it so there's no headaches for me or you
They-
down the road.
Right, they don't have to. And as the chairman said, historically, we have not been enforcing, or we have not been citing car dealers for replacing a battery or windshield wiper blades in the parking lot. We don't.
Yeah, but now you're right here gonna put a stipulation against his business
Right.
that says he can't do it. He has to go take that vehicle, pull it off the road, put it in the garage, do the 5-minute thing. It'll take him longer to make sure the car doesn't fall off the jack than this guy who can walk out of Advance Auto with a new battery.
Right.
And the employee can pop it in, put the things on it, tighten it up, and off they go.
Right. So
That's
what?
not
what-
fair to.
Right, understood. So what the commission can do is discuss this suggestion of Mr. Amenta after the hearing is closed, because I don't think there's
So
a problem. I think,
We're only talking about a few things of it?
well, we're talking about 6.12.2, which says that all repairs shall be entirely within a building.
Oh, I know.
Right,
but-
that's all that Mr. Amenta's talking about.
Why would we have to stop and not complete the talk now?
Because the public hearing is open. What I'm saying is that's something that you can do that later after the hearing is closed. You don't have to agree now.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I misunderstood
right.
you.
That's
My
all I
bad,
meant.
My bad.
Okay, so I'm thinking that maybe there's a way to do it where you have, again, a stipulation in regards to the amount of time that it's out there or whatnot. It, to me, makes sense.
Okay, when we're discussing for the final approvals, we'll take that under consideration. So make sure that we
right.
discuss it.
Yeah, I have
And then
my notes.
moving on, 6.11.3, just so that the regulations read properly and each paragraph references the other, it says 100 feet of any residence, but yet down in 6.115, it says residential zone, so I think it probably just makes sense to make it say residential zone, so you have continuity there.
Yeah, make sure that that's
Yeah.
the same, because it's traditionally to the zone line.
And then on 6.114, again, getting back to used car dealers, new car dealers, it says no display or storage in the motor vehicle in the front yard. If you do determine that it is a good idea to have used car dealers and new car dealers, I think that that is going to have to be addressed. And again, with stipulations that, there should be no for sale signs in there, no flying banners. It's got to be professional. So that would have to be addressed, and it's my hope that the used car and the new car dealers are allowed. You mentioned 6.115 as far as 50 feet versus 100 feet. I just posed a question to commissioners. If you lived in proximity of an auto use, would you want to be 50 feet or 100 feet away from it? And then just also the drive-through speakers, I think, is 300 feet. So again, that seems like it's a little nonsensical. And then lastly, as far as overhead service doors, I understand where you guys are coming from with that. We've got a lot of overhead service doors, and we've had them for years. And that when we redid our facility, it was way back in the 90s, before the 2007 amendments were pulled. And what I would like to see happen is that my concern is that my property, I want to improve upon it. But to improve upon it, I'm a non-conforming use right now. So I'm okay with the amount of garage doors that we have. And what I would say would probably be a way that we could address all of the non-conforming uses is say, any validly approved non-conforming use in existence as of, the date that these regulations go in is valid at this point, but you cannot increase the amount of doors. So if I wanted to square off my building, and I have 10 bay doors, and I said, you know what, I'm going to square off my building, I'm going to put bay doors in the back. Or if I lessen my bay doors, if I said, I have 10, now I want to have 8, but I'm going to put 8 in back. That I would want to be able to do. So if I reduce my amount of doors, I say, hey, we're reducing the amount of doors, I'm putting some on the back, but I want to be able to come in as a validly approved use and know that I'm not conforming and not be subject to saying, hey, you're not conforming, we can't deal with you.
It's a big, oops, sorry.
So that's it, that's all I have. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the time that you're taking to try to get these right. And I bring all these points and all these, little things like residential zone and in one paragraph to the other, just because I want it to be black and white, no interpretation or very little interpretation, so that, we know what is going to work and what's not going to work.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. And
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Nuff. I'm an attorney with an office at 147 Broad Street in Milford, Connecticut. You are accustomed to seeing my colleague, Amy Suchins, who is on vacation this evening, and we represent 43 SB Newington. This is one of the things where, you don't know whether you're speaking in favor or against, but there are two specific issues that I know that Amy has spoken to you about in the past. I just want to remind the commission, particularly in light of the conversation you had tonight, which candidly, you really had made some insightful comments, starting with you, Mr. Chairman, about that this is a special permit use and that you have discretion and you have the ability to require applicants to make changes to their plans in a manner to protect neighbors and to have an attractive location. And in that regard, we had made the recommendation that you eliminate the distance requirement and to permit overhead doors to face the street, and I think Attorney Hauser would say not only face the street, but face the residential zone. And here's the two reasons why. I know that Commissioner Claffey and Commissioner Woods both spoke about the overhead doors, and that's whether by technology or by landscaping or by architectural treatments, the doors can be treated in such a way that they have the appearance of the building and they can still be very attractive. And I would say that the same rationale or logic applies to the distance requirements as well. Certainly, our clients operating the Firestone has demonstrated that you can operate at least a tire repair facility or tire replacement facility in close proximity to neighbors in a manner that doesn't bother them. The doors are shut whenever the power tools are running. I don't want to get into the specifics of the litigation or the ongoing and sort of tedious litigation that we've been involved in, but I think if you go there and you'll see that there are no noise issues regardless of where you're located because of the safety protocols and the noise protocols that have been put in place candidly through the litigation. Air conditioned so that the doors can remain closed all through the summer. There's fencing. So I think you may not want to tie your hands both with regard to the doors and with regard to the distance requirements, and treat each application as it comes before you. All land is unique. Each application is unique. You may have a situation where neighbors can be more than adequately protected, and the two properties abut one another. You don't know how large the two parcels are. And I think you ought to give yourself the flexibility on both the doors and the distance requirement and deal with it on a case-by-case basis and have the applicants put in those precautions or those features that make the site attractive and make it such that it doesn't impair the neighbor's ability to enjoy their property. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
thank you very much. Anyone else? Go.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner. I wasn't going to speak, but Mr. Nuff has induced me to come to the podium.
Regular.
It's hard to find the words to respond to Mr. Nuff and his client. Mr. Nuff's basic message, as I just heard it, is, trust us, we'll get along with the neighbors. The reason that Mr. Nuff's client and my individual homeowner clients have been in litigation now for more than 7 years is that approach did not work. The single most important thing that this commission is considering right now is to protect the residential neighbors. I absolutely agree with what Mr. Minor said before. This map. This is the map that protects the neighbors. And now, I agree there's a big difference between 50 and 100 feet. But if you eliminate the protection and you allow these types of uses to be adjacent to residential zones and residential homes, then there is really no control and as was just said, no enforcement mechanism, and you're going to have exactly what has caused the litigation to the Firestone, which is 5 garage bay doors that face 4 homes. One is 110 feet, one is 50 feet, one is 300 feet, another is 300 feet. These are people who have, because of what Firestone did, a direct line of sight to the garage doors, to doors that are opening and closing. And do you say the noise issue has been solved? No, the noise issue has not been solved. The decibel level from the pneumatic tools has been solved, but the noise issue has not been solved. Mr. Nuff's client is facing a May 1 injunction hearing where we're going to ask Judge Berger to shut down the Firestone because of their 7 years of trying to push this envelope and hoping the neighbors don't have the ability to respond. And that is, so you're looking at the zoning regulations. I'm not going to get into the litigation, but the single most important thing in front of this commission is preserving the protection of the residential uses. And this map shows you are dealing with dozens, if not hundreds, of properties in the town that deserve your protection. Commissioner.
Could you just state your name for the record, please?
I'm sorry, Tim Hollister.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Commissioners suggest that we leave it open and we take another shot at it next meeting.
Can we leave it open, but add in kind of some new wordings that we've heard tonight, or?
Well,
He's going to go by,
Or do we
I
have to
suggest
close
that,
it and then?
no, I suggest that the planner go back and take another look at what we
Some of the
have.
things that were stated in the public were stated last time, but weren't changed or
right.
for us to talk about, or is that?
Well, okay, it's a gray area.
Okay.
Okay, what I did do after the last meeting was the suggestions that either came from the audience or from the commission that seemed to be non-controversial and didn't involve any additional protection or not, I made some of those changes. I specifically did not make any changes that might be controversial or that not every commissioner would agree with. I specifically did not make some of those. And of course, the bigger question of the 100-foot versus 50-foot is still open. What I did, though, a couple weeks ago, is I did file a copy of what I'm calling version B of the regs with the lesser protections, with the 50-foot and allowing roll-up windows. I did file a copy of that, what I'm calling version B, with the town clerk. I sent a copy to CROG. So 30 days after I file it with CROG, you could have a hearing on it to satisfy the concern that the neighbors weren't given constructive notice. And sometime between now and then,
Fall back.
if it looks like the majority of the commissioners want the 50-foot,
You're following the proper steps
Right.
to
If-
protect
if-
us
if
to
we
go back and
decide as a
discuss.
commission that we're going to go to 50 feet, we have it's in place to have the hearing.
Yes,
But if
exactly.
we decide that we're going to go with the 100 feet, then that's a mute
Okay.
item.
I understand what you did, or are doing.
Okay, so get a motion do we need a motion to?
continue it? Yeah, sure, continue.
Have a
Make mo-
motion to-
Continue.
Go
Make a
ahead.
motion that this can be continued.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're good. Next item C, 1219. Want to read that into?
Yes. Petition 1219 petition 12-19, zoning text amendment, section 7.4.21, erosion and sedimentation control plan, town plan and zoning commission applicant.
Okay, the town of Newington, like every town in Connecticut, has a permit to allow stormwater to discharge into the rivers and streams of the state. This is a process that's been in place for I think about a decade or so. And our current, what's called MS4 permit, contains a requirement that we tighten up some of our zoning regulations to protect water quality in Newington. And one of the things we need to do is to, first of all, use the correct term for the DEP E&S guidelines. It used to be the January 1985. Now it's 2002. So we need to update that, and add a new sentence which says, if the erosion and sediment control plan does not display the name and contact information for the person responsible for the plan, that information shall be provided to TPZ not less than 2 weeks prior to construction. And I'm recommending we do this because applicants, they always give us a name and a phone number that goes on the Mylar of the person theoretically who's responsible for the E&S plan. But usually that's like the engineer who designed it. That's not the actual guy with boots on the ground who's responsible, who's been hired by the builder to make sure the silt fence is working, because usually they don't know who that's going to be when the plans are approved by the commission. They usually don't hire that person until like a year later or so. So what this regulation will do is we'll require the developers to tell us who the guy we should call at 2 a.m. when there's a storm and the silt fence is failing and muddy water is gushing into rivers and streams. Not the name of the engineer who designed the project.
That be the GC though?
Whoever it is, the person that we call at 2 a.m. who will jump into his car with a roll of silt fence and come out to the site. Again, not the PE who designed this project in an office in Stratford or whatever.
When do you expect to get that information?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Not less than 2 weeks before they begin construction.
Oh, okay. So that's fair, because then they'll have somebody.
Yeah, they'll know at that point who it is. Right.
Look, can I ask a question? How does it currently work with complexes that, I'll use the Wood Trust on Fenn Road? They have sedimentation control devices in place. Some have been blown away, failed. Like how then, since nothing active going on that, is that separate in here?
Yeah, yes. A better example would be the assisted living facility that the commission approved up at the top of the hill. I drove by it a couple weeks ago during a rainstorm, and again, there was muddy water gushing under the silt fence. So I told Andrew to call whoever it is that we have on file. Problem is, it's probably Mike Frisbee, whose name we have on file. And he's a conscientious person, but he's the developer. He's the owner of the land. He's not the person who's been hired to maintain the site. We need.
I see what you're saying.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Any questions from the commissioners? How do you want to proceed, Mr.
Close the hearing and move to approval, if you would.
Motion, we close the hearing and move for approval tonight.
Second.
Made second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Very good. Approval of minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion made. Motion made second. Any discussion? Any corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There's no new business except for item C, Newington Ridge Preserve, which
Well, I can report that the homeowners had a meeting with the developer a couple of weeks ago, and the developer agreed to do certain things by a deadline that's later this month. Hopefully, at our next meeting, I'll report that the developer has prepared a new application for a wetlands permit in consultation with the homeowners, because they are a co-owner, and that project will move forward. Now, I have been...
Go ahead.
I speak to various people at that project. I speak to some of the homeowners. I speak to the officers of the HOA who are not the same person. And some of the homeowners want to be more aggressive than others as far as calling the bond. So it's certainly possible that at the next P&Z meeting, some of the homeowners, maybe even the association itself, will come to you and say, enough's enough, it's time to call the bond. But I told them that if that is what they want to do, don't expect the commission to be able to take action that night. Because if the commission decides to call the bond, that needs to be prepared in advance. I need to talk to the town attorney to make sure it's worded correctly and so forth. So that's not going to happen off the cuff the same night.
Mr. Sobieski.
Just one quick question, Mr. Planner. You're dealing with the association itself and not individual owners, right?
I just said I'm dealing both.
Right, but I mean,
Because I'll take a call from anybody, but I will only act on something that comes from the president of the HOA.
From the association. That's what I want to make clear.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner
No,
Woods.
statement. While I respect the homeowners and their plight there, it would be this commission that would pull the bond, not because they requested it. They could ask this commission to entertain that, but it would be our findings that it does that. And then, it's been a while since I was involved in it, but I don't even think we do it. Once we do it, then we're out of it and it becomes legal, correct? It would become.
Well, actually, there are a couple of options that have been kicked around in this specific situation. There's been talk about if the commission decides to call the bond, working out an agreement with the homeowners association with oversight by the town and let them GC the project, so to speak. That's one idea that's been kicked around. The other idea would be for the town itself to hire a contractor to finish the work, and then the town would oversee the work. This has been kicked around for a couple of years now.
I'd kick it around a little bit more then, because you don't want the town, what happens if we get involved in it and we, I'm gonna make this up, there's $150,000, there's $200,000 worth of work. We stop at the 150, so when we go in, do we now take responsibility for that? I think this is something that
Well, okay,
needs to work out with
Right.
their developer.
That's
And we need to be whole.
preferred, sure.
That,
Why did they kind of have an about face, if you know? Has there been,
Differences of opinion,
Okay.
like in any organization.
has the, from the previous dealings with this, I remember there were some calculations that were still needed, like some board test results. Was that ever fulfilled to us or to you to disseminate to us?
Well,
It was back in
it's-
the middle of the winter.
it's pretty well established that the resurfacing of the road that was done was not done correctly, and that the repair is going to be substantial. It's
After
within,
They got it ready to drop the,
they made it worse.
and what's our engineer department said?
They made it worse.
Okay, no, I just,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
Mr. Woods.
are we at the point where they can build more houses there? Could the developer get a permit if they sold a house?
There are problems with their wetlands permit that they haven't complied with, that's holding the builder up from continuing to build homes.
Because that's probably how this is going to go away. They needed another infusion of cash to get everything done. But, okay, thank you.
Okay. We're into old business. You have a motion for,
Yes, for which one?
let's do the one that we just did.
Yes, the erosion sediment control.
That's this one.
Yep. mhm, Yep.
Want to
Why
read it?
don't you read that one?
Petition 12-19, zoning text amendment, section 7.4.21, erosion sedimentation control plan, town plan and zoning commission applicant. I move to approve effective upon publication petition number 12-19, zoning text amendment, section 7.4.21, erosion and sedimentation control plan, town plan and zoning commissioner applicant.
Second.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, let's go into the next one, that's Stecca.
I got the whole thing here. I wrote it.
You guys ready?
Ready for discussion, or why don't you make the motion so we could open it up for discussion?
Motion, you want the conditions, then discussion?
After the whole thing.
Okay. Petition 11-19, special permit, section 3.15.3, restaurant outside seating at 3260 Berlin Turnpike, Plaza Azteca. John Kennelly, applicant. Clay Band, Newington LLC owner. Manuel Rubio, 3260 Berlin Turnpike, Newington, Connecticut, contact. I move to approve with conditions petition 11-19 special permit section 3.15.3 restaurant outdoor seating at 3260 Berlin Turnpike Plaza Azteca. John Kennelly applicant, Cleva and Newington LLC owner, Manuel Rubio 3260 Berlin Turnpike, Newington, Connecticut, contact. Condition as follows. 1. Occupancy load calculations determined by Newington Fire Marshal's Department. 2, have fire marshal staff present at special event paid by special permit applicant. 3, have police staff present at special event paid by special permit applicant. 4, special permit applicant attorney be present at special event during event's hours of operation. 5, proper insurance coverage by applicant to hold town of Newington harmless. 6, proper cash bond for the need to have property cleaned up after event if applicant does not have property in adjacent tenant spaces.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. I will open it up for discussions and comments. Commissioner Sobieski.
Yes, I believe Chief Clark wanted payment well in advance, which I did not hear in the motion. I think we should put that in. I can't remember how soon he wanted it in advance, but I would think at least 30 days, if not.
I don't
30 days, that's not going to be possible.
All right, well, I'm sorry. Well in advance, as soon as, like, within the next couple of days.
So amend, condition number 3, have police staff present at special event paid by special permit applicant paid in advance of special event.
Well, yes, but you need to give some
Well, you can't name
5
down-
days before, a week
5 days
before,
would put
something.
'em-
A week, well, whatever
You
time,
can,
you know.
Well, I don't think there's any reason why he couldn't pay the.
Then you want to pay the staff.
I apologize, but the police tell me what the number is, so I have to get the number from the police to pay them.
I know.
I think if it's just as long as it's paid in advance.
Commissioner Fox.
The applicant, Attorney Kennelly, had said that, he would have the hold harmless clause effective for 1 day. Now, I'd like to see that at least, effective at least until 2 a.m. the next morning. So if he starts at 12 p.m. to 2 a.m., for it to be until 10 a.m. 10 p.m. when they close, or even 1 o'clock when the restaurant closes. Anybody can be driving around a little later or late and getting across the street or whatever, and then get hurt or killed. So.
Okay, you want to make that change?
Proper insurance, item 5, change under conditions, proper insurance coverage by applicant to hold town of Newington harmless, for the extent of 1 hour past the closing time of the event, which was 1 a.m., which was 2 a.m., so I don't.
Okay, but let me quibble the whole harmless. I think what the attorney was saying was, there's no such thing as whole harmless. You want him to be additional,
You're holding them harmless.
additional insured is the phrase that should be used. That would be the proper phrase.
That's two different things. Hold
Yeah.
harmless and
your
additional
business.
assured are two different legal and
Right, then you know what?
insurance terms, so.
Well, I'd probably
He's
use
going to
the-
give us an insurance certificate.
Yeah.
Every time I write it, you guys want to change it. We
Well,
discussed it, right?
Well, yeah.
We're discussing it, Anthony, so that we can change it.
We should
So
have
that
discussed
when-
it before we wrote it into the record.
No, it's not in the record.
It's not in the
until we
record
say
yet.
it's in the
All right.
record.
Okay, do you also want to specify the limits that Attorney Kennelly suggested, the 1.35 million? I mean, it means nothing to me, but do you want it, because I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know what it means, but do you want that in the motion also?
As
Okay.
long as it's effective, like,
For the duration of the event, yeah.
after the place closes, not after the event is ended.
You have all of these down?
Well, yeah, and I'll speak for the attorney. I would assume that he's going to get the right insurance for his client, and And we are going to be included in that. We will be an additional insured. I'm sure he's not going to get a policy that ends at midnight. That'd be ridiculous, so.
No, he already has
Check, give him a certificate
the
of
way it
insurance.
works is he already has the insurance in place. He goes to his agent and says, I want to put on the insurance certificate an additional insured, the town of Newington, for this specific event, and it'll end at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. That's how it'll be written.
Correct, and I'll
Sounds
provide a
good.
declaration page
Right.
to the evidence proving you're insured.
And you'll provide the town with a certificate of insurance.
It's called the declaration page, adding you as an additional insured pursuant to this discussion.
Okay. Any other additions to the motion? Okay, the motion made and is made in second. Do we have a roll call vote? The chairman will vote last.
Commissioner Woods?
Yes.
Commissioner Sobieski?
Yes.
Commissioner Claffey?
Yes.
Commissioner Camillo?
Yes.
Commissioner Braverman?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Commissioner Fox, sorry.
Yes.
Commissioner Adu?
Yes. Okay, it's a unanimous vote of the commission. We're going to hold your feet to the fire. You have to come back next year and do the same drill if you expect to do it next year. And hopefully this year will be an example of how it should be done.
Good luck.
I will be there all day, so I'll make sure of it.
Good luck.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'm sure that our council people will take a drive-by, make
I'm
sure that
they
you
will
are
too.
there.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, is there any other, petitions for public hearing? You have petitions for public hearing to put on?
None.
Yeah, you
Just,
do.
well, we're
Have
going
the
to,
ones
we'll
that-
redo that one.
Well, you get artichoke, don't you?
Yes, but I already know about that one.
Okay. And that's going to be on for the next meeting. Right?
Yes, for
Okay.
the public hearing, yes.
Okay. Town planners report.
Okay, I'm trying to get the agenda up here for folks can see it. And I don't know why it won't cooperate.
I agree.
Okay, I had two items in my report. One was the POCD update, but we talked about that. And the other item, just wanted to suggest that the commissioners consider, and this is something we talked, the CEO and I talked about. Under the regulations, a homeowner is allowed to have what's called an oversized vehicle. And that's pretty complicated, but just think of it as, a big truck, whatever. However, it cannot be parked in front of the house. It has to be either to the side of the house or behind the house. And that's usually, that's usually sufficient. But in many cases, we have one non-conforming one that's been going on for years, where he's a not sure what exactly he does, but he has a van that his company is assigned to him. And he has a little cape with a very small yard, and he parks his van in his driveway in front of his house, which is a violation of the regs. Now, he's been doing it for decades, so he's grandfathered, so he's allowed. But no one else could do that, because the rule is that the vehicle cannot be in front of the house. It has to be behind or beside the house. And we got to think about this some more the other day, because we've actually gotten complaints about two different tractor-trailer drivers who bring the cabs home, because they live here, and they park the tractor portion in their driveway. We've gotten some calls about this situation in both cases, but in neither case was it an actual complaint from a neighbor. It was brought to our attention that these are zoning violations. So what I'm going to suggest you consider is amending the regs to allow someone who has an oversized vehicle to be allowed to park it in his driveway in front of his house by special permit. Making it allowable by special permit means he'd have to come in here for a public hearing. His neighbors would be notified. They'd have the chance to say, no, we don't want our neighbor to be allowed to park his big truck right in front of the house. We want it to stay in back or to the side. So I'm just throwing that out to you, and maybe in future meetings we can talk about it some more. But this is this might be a way to make things a little more convenient for the person who drives a truck for a living in some way. So just throwing it out there.
Only thing I could see with that is that, the size of the thing. You're talking about a tractor trailer horse, or the front portion of the tractor trailer or 18-wheeler. That's a big vehicle. I mean, you're talking about a little van, like a little cargo van that someone like a plumber or electrician has. That's a different story. But, the extent of how the size of these things can vary, where I don't see it as a problem. We're making a problem. I think that we're making a problem. We're trying to solve something that's really not a problem if you only have a couple of complaints. I'll open it up to the commission.
Do we have a definition on oversized vehicle? And how does that coincide with what a commercial vehicle is?
Oh, I can't answer that question, but we have a definition of commercial vehicle, and a person is allowed one commercial vehicle in the back. He's allowed a second one by special permit. The definition of commercial vehicle, of oversized vehicle is a page of the zoning regs. It's.
Well, that's why I'm saying this is a complex issue, because if I drove a big rig and parked it in my backyard, it's okay, but the minute I come
Put it in the front
and
yard.
put my son's plumbing van in my front yard, that's the violation.
Correct.
But that 35,000-pound truck is okay to be in the backyard.
Currently, under your regulations, yes.
So how does that coincide with the commercial vehicle ordinance that we changed like a year and a half ago?
It's the same thing. That's what we're talking about.
That it wasn't vetted properly, or?
Right, what I'm suggesting is now that that regulation has been in place for a couple of years,
Okay.
that here's a tweak that I'm suggesting you consider.
Commissioner Woods?
That commercial vehicle, though, would only be allowed in the backyard if there was a driveway to the backyard, correct? You couldn't drive it around and park it on the lawn in the backyard. There'd have to be some sort of access. I'm assuming that's what.
Well, I'm not sure he wouldn't be allowed to drive it across his side yard lawn to get to the back. As much as that makes me cringe, I don't think there's anything in the regs that would
Really
prohibit someone from doing that.
The regs are kind of goofy. I mean, the way it's set up is, it's almost comical.
Then let me ask this question, because I think I know where you're going. If we decide to take this on and do it by special permit, it is case by case. So if the neighborhood came out and said, we don't want this vehicle there, we would be I suppose we could allow it, but we'd be hard pressed to allow it. But if everybody came out and said, hey, we don't really care.
Right.
We're fine with it. I mean, I don't know how big of a deal it is. I've run into it over the years with people that I do some business with, that sometimes they're forced to parking in the garage. And I think there's one that's been going on for quite a while. I was involved in it on the other end of town. That sometimes most of it comes down to the two neighbors don't like each other, and it's more about the neighbors not liking each other than having an issue with a truck.
True.
So I don't know how you make that issue go away.
Yeah.
What do you create, or are you creating that issue?
Well, every time we do something, we create an issue. We don't, we
But-
try to
but-
solve problems, but we create another issue.
That being said,
It's just
Commissioner
in nature.
Woods, if there's a residence town that feels our zoning regs have been good to these larger vehicles that make our town look better, feel better, but he has no say on it because he or she has no say because it's at the other side of town. It doesn't directly impact their neighborhood, but it does impact their town. So you have two. That's like
Well,
saying,
that person could
that's
still
like
come to the
saying-
hearing.
They have a say.
They wouldn't get a letter telling them, but they'd see the red and white sign in front, and if they saw the sign, they'd call and ask what's going on, and I would tell them, and then they would decide to either come and speak or stay home.
So then why would we want to segregate it and streamline it just to the abutting neighbors?
No, I'm just saying that because there would be a public hearing, the neighbors would be able to come and speak in favor or against. They'd have a say, is my point.
Right. Gotcha.
That person who lives on the other side of town and happen to be driving by it every day and it bugs them, they would have the equal say, and it would be weighed just the same, right?
Well, it would be weighed however you individually choose to weigh it, yeah, just like any comment at a public hearing.
Okay. Is there any, with you and the CEO looking at it, were there anything else that has popped up in complaints or thought processes on that regulation because it's
Right.
been active and corrected? Like, are there other little?
Right, nothing comes to mind, but that's a good question.
Well,
Yeah, we'll maybe
signage.
revisit some other thing, well, strictly with this oversized vehicle regulation. Nothing comes to mind as having been a problem since we've adopted it.
No, the RVs or anything?
Correct, nothing, but I'll check with the CEO to see if he's gotten any complaints.
Or, not complaint, but the thought process on,
How many complaints have you gotten? How big of an issue is it?
It's not so much a big issue, so much as something that has occurred to the staff that we want to be business friendly. We don't want to sacrifice the residential character of a neighborhood, but there are a lot of self-employed people who drive a truck of some sort for their job who can't.
That comes down to the same thing as what we talked about before. It comes down to enforcement. Unless someone's complaining, then it's really not an issue. Just like the issue that Bob Amenta brought up about, he brought up an issue that we should address the people putting on the windshield wipers. Well, you could start addressing all of these little things in the zoning regulations, and you make the zoning regulations so complicated that they're hard to regulate. We have a problem regulating what we have now. I say if the zoning enforcement officer sees a truck in a van in someone's yard, he don't go over there and tell him to move it. But if he gets complaints, then we act on that complaint. I mean, I don't want to start making the regulations so complicated that they're hard to enforce. Like his thing, well, we should regulate this, and we should have a section talk about the guy that's putting the windshield wiper on, and should we allow him to do it? We got to make a laundry list of stuff that they could do and they can't do. And, the regulations would be unwieldy, where we just about can read them the way they are now. I don't know, it's up to the commission if they want to take this on another meeting and discuss it further. Huh?
It's something to think about.
Yeah, okay,
That's all.
well, if you want
Yeah.
to bring it up again at another point.
I don't think I will, but if I brought it out there, but if any commissioner does want to, then they can bring it up at a future meeting.
Okay.
Or bring it back to us if it becomes a bigger issue for you.
Yeah, if you see that all of a sudden you start getting a bunch of complaints, then, but I would suggest to the zoning enforcement officer that it's, you don't go looking for them unless there's a complaint.
Right. Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, so that's, next item is communications. Any communications?
Yes, I sent all of the CROG communications out to everybody as I get them. I was on a conference call tonight with CROG. We're going to be modifying some of the rules for our commission, but it has nothing really to do with the town of Newington. It's just that because they extended the number of towns in CROG itself, we're up to 38, I believe now. They've got to readjust their master plan to show the 38 towns that are now part of CROG, the Greater Hartford. Thank you.
Public participation? Anyone from the public? No. Remarks by commissioners? Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Karen doing?
Not bad.
And then you can choose.
Get that stuff I sent you on education?
After it's all done.
Haven't time, that's all right.
No, wait a minute, I'm trying to think. I have so many emails and everything else.
I mean,
You're not protecting the residents.
the government white papers I get.
Oh, yes.
Every time
I
you
like
have a
that.
problem with
There's a lot
it's
of,
because of the distance.
information out there.
Yeah.